Good day, class. Finally, we are in our finals. And our first lesson for our finals is Essentials of Pre-Transfusion Testing. At the end of the week, you are able to explain the laboratory investigations of various blood group associated diseases, enumerate measures for the prevention and treatment of blood group associated diseases where applicable, discuss the purposes, principles, and methods of compatibility testing. Differentiate major from minor cross-match. Define the various methods of cross-matching. Explain the new methodologies employed in compatibility testing. Describe the ways of detecting and identifying antigens and antibodies of the other blood group systems and blood group collections. Identify the various factors that affect compatibility tests. Explain the procedures to resolve incompatible cross-matches. Pretransfusion compatibility testing is a series of procedures to ensure compatibility and prevent immune-mediated hemolytic transfusion reaction. So these are processes or procedures done before transfusion. So from the word pre, so these are done before transfusion. Because transfusion is a critical procedure, there are regulatory and accreditation requirements that should be followed by the blood bank facilities. And there are organizations that do these regulatories and accreditations. So we have the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. So they define blood components as pharmaceuticals because of the intent of their use to cure, mitigate, treat, and prevent disease. The next organization is the AABB, or the American Association of Blood Banks. This is an accrediting organization whose goals include enhancing quality and safety of services provided by blood banks and transfusion services. The next organizations are the CLIA, or Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, and the CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. So these organizations have the authority to regulate pre-transfusion testing. So here in our country, walang AABB, but we have the DOH, the Department of Health. The DOH inspects laboratories and blood bank facilities. So they also created the program, National Voluntary Blood Services Program, or NVBSP. This is also called the Republic Act 7719, which promotes voluntary donations to provide sufficient supply of blood and regulate blood banks. This act aims to inculcate public awareness that blood donation is a humanitarian act. We also have the PBCC, or Philippine Blood Coordinating Council. PBCC is an organization that promotes voluntary donation, promotes the rational use of blood. They also provide technical assistance to legislative and regulatory authorities, and they provide professional education, including non-professionals, like people in the community. PBCC conducts seminars on quality assurance in blood banks, and training courses on quality management in blood transfusion services, and quality circle in blood transfusion services. So, facilities that provide blood components and lab services are subject for inspection by any of these entities. Table 11.1. So these are the steps in pre-transfusion testing. So first, the physician will request transfusion. Then, identification of transfusion recipient and blood specimen collected. Then, testing of transfusion recipient's blood specimen. So under this step, there are evaluation of specimen for testing suitability, ABO group, RH type. Then if it is RH negative, so we will do weekly testing, screening for unexpected antibodies to red cell antigens. So next is the antibody identification if unexpected antibodies are detected, and comparison of current and previous test results, and any discrepancies shall be investigated and appropriate action taken before a unit is issued for transfusion. Next step will be the donor RBC unit testing. So this is done by our blood centers. So they will do ABO group confirmation and RH type confirmation for RH negative RBC units. Next will be the donor red cell unit selection. So selection of components of ABO group and RH type that are compatible with the transfusion recipient and with any unexpected allogenic antibodies. Next will be the compatibility testing or cross-match. So there is the serologic or computer or electronic cross-match. And lastly is the labeling of blood or blood components with the recipient's identifying information and issue. So blood transfusion is essential in caring a patient, especially those who have too much blood loss. But there is also a risk of adverse effects like HDR. But we could still achieve favorable results if pre-transfusion compatibility testing is carefully performed and results shows compatibility between donor and recipient. So first, we should have our specimen collection. Specimen collection needs to be positive needs a positive patient identification and specimen labeling. Clerical errors. So naka-red yan because that is the major cause of transfusion-associated fatalities. May study sa New York na sa loob ng 10 taon, 47% ang patient identification error. So, malaki 47%. So, ito yung paulit-ulit kong sinasabi sa inyo na mortal sin sa ating field ang misidentification kasi this will lead to death of the patient. Because clerical error is the major cause of transfusion-associated fatalities, syempre, greatest threat ito sa safe transfusion therapy. So, misidentification is the most common clerical error. Misidentification sa pag-draw ng blood or before transfusion itself. So this is the responsibility of all staff taking care of the patient, especially the attending nurse, the medtech who did the cross-matching, the medtech released the blood unit, etc. So to prevent this error, you should always compare your requisition form or your blood request form with the recipient's wristband identification. So this is an example of a blood request form. So the request form should have the recipient's full name, his patient ID, date of birth, sex, the source of the specimen, date collected, time collected, the phlebotomist, the requesting physician, and the test requested. So do not identify patient from bed labels or wall labels because many times na wala doon ang patient. So I have an experience na when I was an intern, doon ako sa mail ward, I was looking for the patient and then I called for the name and there is a man lying on the bed. So when I called the name, sabi niya ako. When I checked the when I checked the wristband, wala pala kasi siya pala yung watcher. So muntik ko nang nakunang dugo yung watcher. So please always check your request and the wristband of the patient or let the patient state their full name. Okay? So, if mahirap spell yung, or kung mahirap spell yung name nila, so let them spell it out. Spell it out. Okay? Spell their name out. So, ako, as my experience, I will always ask or verify the spelling of the name. So, for example, I will ask them, Ma'am, tama ang spelling na nakabutang sa request form. So, there, if it is not right, they will tell me the right spelling. Okay? Kasi usually sa cashier pa lang mali na yung spelling kasi may ibang patient tayo or may ibang patient tayo na hindi clear yung pagsulat nila. Okay? So you should always let the patient state their full name. So, may times din na same ang name ng patient. So, this time, you should check the date of birth of the patient. So, ask their date of birth and compare the request from you are holding. So, again, never offer a name or ask the patient to confirm that it is correct. So, for example, Morados, ma'am, or are you Mr. Park? So, wag ganun ha guys, because there are patients who are disoriented and may answer yes. So, sige lang na silang yes. Okay? So, iwasan natin yan. So, if may pedia patients kayo, or incoherent yung patient nyo, you may ask their watcher to verify the name of the patient. So again, if you ask the watcher, let them state the full name of the patient. Test tube should be labeled before you leave the recipient's bedside. So meaning, you should label beside the patient because you need to compare the label tube to the wristband. Or in my case, I will ask the patient's name again. So for example, this picture. So comparing the tube labeling with the wristband. So next, compare the tube with the requisition form also. So this picture. So all writing must be legible and indelible. Labels should be readable and clear. So, may hospitals na may barcode system na. So, ang style nila is stick the barcode to the test tube sample. So, ibig sabihin, dapat talaga legible ang pagsulat or ang pag-label nyo ng name sa tube para hindi magkamali sa paglagay ng barcode. So in this picture, this is done if you have the blood unit comparison of the wristband of the patient or recipient with the label of the blood unit. So this is done before giving the blood to the patient. Specimen requirements. So either anticoagulated or clotted specimens are acceptable for pre-transfusion testing. Anticoagulated specimens are preferred due to ease of handling. Plasma, disadvantage lang nito is plasma inactivates complement, so some antibodies may not be detected. Pero mas preferred pa rin yung anticoagulated blood kasi we also need the red cells, which is mas marami doon sa anticoagulated blood compared to clotted blood. Clotted specimens may require additional washing steps to minimize interference in test interpretations. Serum may contain fibrin clots that may be difficult to distinguish from true agglutination. So blood samples from IV line is not acceptable because mako-contaminate yung blood with the IV fluid and it may produce erroneous results. So, before collection, you should turn off the IV line for 5 minutes. So, if hindi kayo marunong mag-turn off ng IV line, you may ask the attending nurse for assistance. So, again, turn off the IV line for 5 minutes prior to blood collection. Hemolyzed samples are also not acceptable because this could mask the antigen-antibody mediated hemolysis and it will be difficult in interpreting the results. The viability of the EDTA tubes is 8 hours. So, situation. Let us say 16 hours duty ka. For 16 hours duty ka. So, you got an EDTA sample for patient Kim by 10 a.m. The sample was collected by 9:50 a.m. His sample is for cross-matching. So, after 2 hours, you release the results. So, by 1 p.m., the nurse took the blood unit and transfused by 1:30 p.m. By 3 p.m., tumawag yung nurse na sinabi sa'yo na i-cross-match pa yung standby na blood unit ni patient Kim. So, will you use the EDTA sample for Mr. Kim collected at 9:50 a.m. since it is still viable for processing? So, anong answer niyo? So, the answer is no. No, because the patient may produce new antibodies from the blood unit given to him recently. So, you should collect another blood sample. But ideally, you should wait 6 hours after post-BT in order for the donor cells to circulate throughout the body of the patient. So, that is the ideal way. Pero sometimes, wala tayong magagawa once requested na ng doktor na kunan agad ng blood ang patient. So when the physician says that you should get blood sample to the patient, so you should follow the request of the physician. Compatibility tests. So first, review the records. Staff should know the records of the patient, especially his ABO and RH group. Based on my experience, the protocols of the laboratory is mag-blood type and RH type pa rin, even if the patient knows his ABO and RH group, because there are some cases of wrong blood typing. And yes, marami talagang ganun. So I have experienced it many times. So may nag-reclaim na patient na A positive sila, but after doing the blood typing, O positive yung lumabas na result. So ganyan ka risky kahit blood typing lang. Okay? So imagine if hindi kami nag-retype sa patient, maybe transfusion siya ng A positive. So kung walang pre-transfusion test, the patient might die. Next is the ABO grouping. Licensed reagents should be used in ABO grouping. Tube method, forward and reverse ABO grouping should be done. Resolve any ABO discrepancy that you may encounter. If hindi na kaya i-resolve kasi kulang yung oras, O negative blood should be given to the patient. Next is the RH typing. Same with the ABO grouping, licensed RH reagents should be used. Weekly test should be done if my RH negative. So, in weekly test, use RH negative control in testing week D. So, if the control is positive, the result should be invalid. Next is the antibody screening. Antibodies to the blood group antigen must be detected because there are antibodies that are clinically significant and they are often associated with RBC destruction, HTR, and HDFN. So after knowing the details of the patient, we will move down to the selection of donor units. In donor unit testing, blood suppliers perform some tests to blood bank components. Ang blood suppliers natin dito is the blood centers, which is the Davao Blood Center and the Philippine Red Cross. So they perform ABO, RH grouping, weekly tests if they are RH negative units, and test for infectious diseases like HIV, hepatitis panel, syphilis test, and recently FDA recommended to add testing for Zika virus. So once the unit meet the criteria, the unit is distributed to transfusion facilities. So ano yung transfusion facilities? Which are the hospitals or any facility na nagtra-transfuse ng blood. So transfusion facilities should ensure proper labeling and testing of the blood unit by confirming the ABO grouping and RH typing. So upon receiving the units, transfusion facilities should confirm the ABO group and the RH typing of the blood unit. Minsan may mga kasama pa yung minsan may kasama pang infectious diseases na mga test. So again, once ma-receive na ng transfusion facilities yung blood unit, they should do ABO grouping, RH typing, and infectious diseases na tests para i-confirm na tama yung details na galing sa blood sa mga blood suppliers. So, based on my experience, di na ito ginagawa sa mga transfusion facilities. But instead, we ask the watcher of the patient first. For example, sir, to ensure for safe blood unit, we could run series of tests for the unit. Pero sir, may additional payment. So, because of that additional payment, ayaw na ng mga watchers kasi medyo mahal and redundant na para sa kanila. So, we let them sign a consent form na it's okay with them not to do those tests. So, if a patient has a detectable clinically significant antibodies, donor units selected for transfusion must be negative for the corresponding antigen. Kaya lang dito sa Pilipinas, wala tayong ganyan. So, it has been agreed that or suggested that packed RBC should be requested instead of whole blood because mas nagkukos ng transfusion reactions ang whole blood units. So, components like platelets, plasma, and cryoprecipitate requires no compatibility testing, but instead, ABO grouping is sufficient because these components contain very few red blood cells. So, Table 11.3 will show you the ABO group selection order for transfusion of RBCs. So, for example, your recipient is AB. So, the first choice should be AB also. Second choice will be A, and the third choice is B, and the fourth choice is O. Okay. Next, if the patient or recipient is A, the first choice should be A, and the second choice is O. If the patient is B, your first choice should be B, and then your second choice is O. And lastly, if O, yung patient natin, O lang yung pwedeng i-donate sa kanya. Okay? So as you can see, you will see that the AB blood type could receive any of the blood types in the ABO group. Pero itong second, third choice, and fourth choice, last resort na yan, class ha. So for last resort na yan ibibigay. Okay? So kung wala na talagang choice. And then ito dapat, this one, the O here, in A, B, and AB should be O negative. As much as possible, it should be O negative. So, if you have the donor unit of the patient, it is time for the cross-matching. Cross-matching is a test to detect ABO group incompatibilities and errors in ABO grouping, labeling, and identification of the patient and the donor. Serologic cross-match is a cross-matching technique where you will mix the recipient and donor sample to detect ABO or ABO group antibody incompatibility. So there are two types of cross-matching, the major and minor cross-matching. So in major cross-matching, plasma or serum of the recipient is mixed with the red cells of the donor. So let us take a look with this figure. So the plasma or serum of the patient mixed with the donor's RBC. The purpose of the major cross-matching is to prevent the transfusion reaction by detecting the antibodies in the recipient's serum or plasma, which reduce the survival of the donor red cells. So while in minor cross-matching, cells of the patient is mixed with the plasma of the donor unit. So let us take a look at this figure. So the serum or plasma of the donor mixed with the recipient's red blood cell. So minor cross-match detects antibodies in the donor unit which may affect the recipient's cells. So for the procedure in major cross-match, again, patient plasma or serum is mixed with the donor RBC. So 1 drop of donor's RBC, 2 drops of plasma. They are incubated at 37 degrees Celsius and then washed. After washing, AHG is added and then centrifuge the test tube. So if there are no agglutination, so the cross-matching result is compatible. But if there is agglutination, so it is incompatible or not compatible. So in minor cross-match, donor serum or plasma is added with the recipient's RBC. So 2 drops of plasma, 1 drop of red cells. So it is incubated at 37 degrees Celsius and then washed 3 times. So after washing, AHG is added, 2 drops of AHD, and then centrifuge. So if there are no agglutination, so it is compatible. And then if there is agglutination, then it is not compatible. Next is the abbreviated cross-match. So this is also called the immediate spin cross-match. So if the patient has no detectable antibodies and no known history of clinically significant antibodies, so this cross-match is done. So in abbreviated cross-match, the recipient's plasma is mixed with the cells of the donor and immediately centrifuged. So after centrifugation, agglutination and hemolysis is observed. So the absence of hemolysis or agglutination is compatible, while presence of hemolysis or agglutination needs further testing. So the next kind of cross-match is the broad spectrum compatibility test. So in this test, it detects clinically significant antibodies. So it involves 3 phases: the immediate spin phase, the 37 degrees Celsius or the thermo phase, and the antiglobulin phase. So for the procedure, immediate spin phase, in immediate spin phase, we will mix the recipient's plasma with donor cells and then add the enhancer, the LISS or the 22% BSA, and then you will centrifuge it. Then you will check for agglutination and hemolysis. So if there are no agglutination or hemolysis, you will proceed to the thermo phase. So in the thermo phase, we will incubate the test tube at 37 degrees Celsius and then you will centrifuge it. So after centrifugation, you will observe for agglutination and hemolysis again. So if there is no agglutination, you will proceed to the AHG or the antiglobulin phase for the Coase test. So in this phase, you will add the anti-human globulin reagent and then you will centrifugate. So if there is no agglutination or if there is absence of hemolysis or agglutination, then it is compatible. If there is presence of hemolysis or agglutination, then it is incompatible or not compatible. Class, this is an example. This is the way you will interpret the results in broad spectrum compatibility test. So the first case is there are no agglutinations in all the phases in major and minor cross-match. So meaning the blood is compatible both in major and minor cross-match. So blood is safe for transfusion. Next is there is a agglutination in the immediate spin of major cross-match and negative reactions in all phases in minor cross-match. The interpretation for this is that blood is incompatible in major cross-match but compatible in minor cross-match. So therefore, blood is not safe for transfusion. In case number 3, there is a reaction in major and minor cross-match in the immediate spin phase. So meaning blood is incompatible both in major and minor cross-matches. So therefore, blood is not safe for transfusion. And the fourth case is there are no agglutination or reaction in the major cross-match, but there is a positive reaction in the minor cross-match of the immediate spin phase. So the interpretation of this is that blood is compatible in major cross-match, but incompatible in minor cross-match. Therefore, blood can be transfused, but with caution. Factors that affect compatibility test. In immediate spin phase, there is incorrect ABO grouping of the recipient or of the donor unit. The resolution is repeat ABO grouping with a new sample and verify the ABO group of the donor unit to the source of the unit, for example, the PRC or Davao Blood Center. Cold reactive allo or autoantibody in the plasma not detected in the antibody detection test. So the resolution first is if the antibody screen was negative, perform antibody identification at room temperature. Include autocontrol to distinguish between allo-antibody and autoantibody. Kasi usually, if may 2+ reaction sa autocontrol, ibig sabihin may autoantibody tayo. Next, pre-warming may overcome the reactivity. Select donor units based on the antibody identified and the clinical significance assessment. You may also include A1, A2, and B cells when testing the plasma to rule out the presence of the immune-mediated or passively acquired ABO antibodies. A thorough stem cell or solid organ transplantation history may be helpful in resolving this type of discrepancy. So, importante talaga yung patient's history. Next is abnormalities in the recipient's plasma. Rulu mimics agglutination and may be present in diseases such as multiple myeloma. So, Rulu formation is detectable only when plasma is present. So, the resolution for this is perform saline replacement and repeat the immediate spin cross match. Saline replacement technique involves removing of plasma from the immediate spin cross match and replacing it with saline. Usually, Rulu will disappear while true agglutination will not. Next in AHG phase. So there is a new alloantibody is present in recipient's plasma. So the resolution is perform antibody identification using the method at which the incompatibility is detected to identify additional antibody specificities. Next is there is a low incidence alloantibody present in the donor red cells. The resolution is perform more extensive antibody identification. Warm reactive autoantibody is present in the recipient's plasma. So the resolution for this is adsorption to remove the autoantibody. Donor unit is positive for DAT. So the resolution is report this incident to the collecting facility. Computer or electronic cross-match electronically verifies ABO compatibility. This cross-match eliminates the need for a serology cross-match, which reduces sample volume and testing time. Two ABO grouping results should be found in the file of the patient, one from the patient records and one from the current specimen collection. The Laboratory Information System, or LIS, must contain donor unit information like identification number or serial number, type of component, ABO group, RH type, donor confirmation typing, and interpretation of the compatibility with the recipient. This figure is the requirements for computer cross-match. So first, is the cross-match requested? If no, then no cross-match should be done. If yes, is there a current ABO-RH and antibody screen on the file? So kung no, collect a current specimen and perform the ABO-RH and antibody screen tests. If yes, then yes na din ito. So are there two ABO-RH types on the file? So kapag wala, perform a second ABO-RH type on a new specimen or repeat the ABO-RH testing on the same specimen for confirmation. If yes, are there any ABO-RH discrepancies? So if merong discrepancies, resolve the ABO-RH discrepancy. If wala, ask the question, positive antibody screen or history of the clinically significant antibody. So kapag yes, so it is not eligible for electronic cross-match. If no, then you can perform the electronic cross-match. Automation in blood centers provides the level of quality assurance required by regulatory standards. Standardized techniques reduce errors, for example, in barcoding system because it provides accurate patient and reagent identification. Column agglutination technology, CAT, or Gel card technology. Its principle is based on heme agglutination. So this is the microtube. We will call this as microtube. The upper part is the chamber and the lower part is the column. Each microtube contains gel, diluent, and reagents. The red cells of the donor and the plasma of the recipient are dispensed in the reaction chamber. The reaction chamber has an air bubble barrier. The card is then incubated and the cells and plasma interact. After incubation, the card is then spun in the centrifuge. If there is sensitized red cells or agglutination, the gel will trap them, and if walang agglutination, the red cells will settle down at the bottom of the microtube. For the procedure, dispense donor red cells in the reaction chamber, add the plasma of the recipient, incubate for 15 minutes, then centrifuge for 9 minutes, and observe and interpret results. The advantages of CAT is first is standardization. There is standardization in reading, grading, and interpretation because gel techniques requires no tube shaking or dislodging of the cell button. Tube shaking depends on how the medtech do it. May iba na sobrang lakas mag-shake ng tube resulting to variation of agglutination reading. So this technique also have standardized procedures because it doesn't require washing anymore. This technique is stable, it requires less sample volume, enhanced yung sensitivity and specificity, and it increases productivity because the procedure is easier and requires less time in incubation period. Disadvantage is that CAT needs a special equipment like the centrifuge and incubator, which are built exclusively for the brand test cards. It also needs a pipettor. Overall, it is quite expensive. So class, these are the equipments or reagent used in CAT. DigiGel Sol for the reagent. These are your gel card, your pipettor, gel card centrifuge, gel card incubator rather, and your gel card centrifuge. Class, let me share to you a video about the procedure of gel technology. The previous video is about the manual method of gel technology. Now, this video is about the fully full automation of gel technology. Now let us proceed to the solid phase red cell adherence or SPRCA technology. In this assay, we may perform with plasma or serum, but plasma is preferable. It is because the clotted samples are incompletely clotted. The serum is also difficult to remove during the wash cycle. To have best results, they recommended to add a pH stabilizing buffer to the isotonic saline for washing microplates. The principle of this technology is based on solid phase technology, where it uses an antigen-coated microwells. In these microwells, LISS and patient serum is added. During incubation, the antibodies will attach to the antigens. After incubation, the wells are washed with pH-buffered isotonic saline to remove unbound proteins. Anti-IgG-coated RBCs are added into the microwells. Then during centrifugation, the indicator red blood cells are forced to close contact with IgG antibodies from the serum or plasma that are bound to the target antigen. So this is called the sandwich technique. If there are no antibodies, the indicator cells will form a clear button at the center of the microwell. The procedure of this technique is LISS plus and plasma or serum is added on the antigen-coated well. Next is the incubation, and then you will wash them, and then indicator red cells are added, and then centrifuge, and then observe for agglutination. So these are the reaction that you will see in SPRCA: 4 plus, 3 plus, 2 plus, 1 plus, and the negative. So there is a tight button. The advantages of SPRCA technology is, first, it is uh, ease, ease of use. It is easy to use because it doesn't need pre-dilution of reagents. Another advantage is that it could process hemolyzed, lipemic, and icteric samples. And because of its enhanced sensitivity, the detection of weak alloantibody is also enhanced. Its disadvantage is that there is a need to purchase special equipment like centrifuge, incubator, and the light source. This video is about the SPRCA technology. This is Neo-Iris, the fully automated SPRCA technology. Solid phase protein A technology. This technology uses a microwell coated with protein A, unlike in SPRCA, which uses red cells. Protein A has a high affinity to the Fc portion of IgG. Antibodies attached to the RBC at the end of the incubation are captured by protein A, forming a visible carpet, which is read as positive. For the procedure, 50 UL plasma or serum and reagent is added in the microwell with a 1% reagent red cells if you do antibody screen or identification, a microwell with patient or donor cells for autocontrol, and a microwell with donor red cells for cross-matching. Then, a low ionic strength solution and is added to the microwells. Mix contents and incubate at 37 degrees Celsius. Centrifuge and then wash with phosphate buffered saline and then AHG is added. Remix microwell, then centrifuge. If there are agglutination, the protein A will capture them and form a homozygous layer on the bottom of the microwell, which is read as positive. If no agglutination, red cells will form in the center of the well. So that is negative. The reaction and pattern are recorded as digital image and interpreted by Tango Infinity. So Tango Infinity is a program in the instrument. For the advantages of solid phase protein technology, first it is standardization in grading and interpretation because it is all done by the machine itself. It has a long shelf life and stability, and outstanding specificity and sensitivity. Its disadvantage is that it needs special equipment. The tests available for screen cell assay are the antibody screening, antibody identification, autocontrol, DAT, weak D, and cross-match. This is a video of Biorad solid screen fully automated machine. And that's the end of the part 1 of essentials of pre-transfusion testing. So please watch the next video for the part 2 of the essentials of pre-transfusion testing. And I want to also to give you a reading assignment. So please read chapters 10, 11, and 12 in your book because my quizzes and exams are taken from the book. So our book is the Modern Blood Banking Transfusion Practices, 7th edition. So these are my references for this video. Last, I hope you had fun in learning about our lesson today. So thank you and God bless.